What's up, Mike?
How you doing, Austin?
Good, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm good.
Hey, question for you too. Is it too late to maybe add somebody to this
I don't
meeting?
think so. I haven't been. This is my first time being part of a lunch and learn, but I imagine you could forward the meeting invite to him.
Okay, because I'm gonna give this guy at Enchanted Rock a call because we talked with them.
I don't know, Daniel, who just joined, might be better to answer that.
Okay, I'll ask real quick. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
thanks.
I mean, you should be able to forward him the invite. I'll see why not.
No, thanks. Sorry. I joined this twice. I don't know how. All right, thanks. I'm gonna forward this email or this over to somebody who's external.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Daniel, do you have an idea of how many people we have attending?
I'm not sure. I want to say this is like my fourth lunch and learn. Normally we have like anywhere from 7 to 15 people, give or take.
Do we want to give a few minutes for people to come in, or do you guys generally start right at 11?
No, we normally give a couple minutes just in case. But I mean, it's up to you.
Yeah.
It's your lunch and learn, brother.
All right. I didn't get much background other than a lunch and learn on meter, so put stuff together and kind of just jumping into it.
Yeah, no worries, man. No worries.
All right. Well, give a few minutes for people to jump in.
All right, sounds good.
All right, I got about 5 minutes past, so let me go ahead and get started. I suppose I can probably turn on my camera so I can see my pretty face. But just before I get started, I start talking about slides. Everyone can see my slides up on the screen.
Yes.
All right. I figured I'd start with an introduction. Looking at the attendee list, a lot of you already know me, but just for anyone that doesn't, my name is Michael Gunn. I'm currently the project manager in engineering performance over internal documentation, as well as supporting CMMS needs that come out of assessments performed by our risk and reliability team led by Jim Forehand. My background dates back, I've had many roles in the power industry over the past 20 years, but I started out in the Navy as an electrician. I got out of the Navy. That gave me kind of that strong foundation in equipment, maintenance, troubleshooting, and basically understanding how end users end up using systems such as Maximo. After leaving the Navy, I went to a training and documentation company where I thought I was going to be an instructor and teaching people, but they kind of stuck me into the SAP world, where I worked on a bunch of SAP projects for a major oil and gas company. I spent 10 years there, primarily with PM and maintenance management modules, setting up and configuring SAP for sites, as well as transitioning from older CMSs such as JD Edwards. I remember one specifically was a DOS-based JD Edwards into SAP. From there, I moved over to PIC. PIC kind of bought out that previous well, there was talk about buying out, but I was kind of a test project and moved over to PIC, where they asked me to look over their Maximo electronic logging programs. So I quickly became more familiar with Maximo and eventually took an unused Maximo system they had and developed it into a multi-org, multi-site instance where we could rapidly implement as new projects came in. I was in the O&M department. And then PIC got bought out by NACE, and I've been at NACE since then. Initially, I went over to the Docs and Training Department as a senior technical writer where I was developing operating manuals, system descriptions, valve and switch alignments, startup shutdown procedures. And also because I had that CMMS background, I've been used on a couple of CMMS assessments and cleanup projects. Where basically it's brought me in, asked me to evaluate how they're using Maximo. Both sites were actually Maximo, and give some recommendations on how they could better utilize the system for their plants. And I have a wide variety of CMS background, from Maximo to JD Edwards to Mainsaver, and name it. I probably looked at it and played around with it, but and that kind of led me to this lunch and learn. NACE Maximo knew that I had some experience and wanted to know if I wanted to give a presentation specifically on Maximo meters. And I just want to point out the distinction between NACE Maximo and what we do. NACE Maximo, and one of the NACE Maximo people, correct me if I'm wrong, but their primary job is to get people set up, do all the IT related aspects that I'm not very familiar with, and technical, configurations, integrations, all that super technical tasks. And then where I come in and Jim's Forehand comes in is, they perform assessments and find needs where maybe they need to improve their PM program, where Jim's team can do a full-on analysis on the effectiveness of your PM program and where you need to fill gaps. And then where my team could come in is we could take those PMs that were developed by Jim's team through risk analysis and then populate templates that we could put into Maximo for you guys. So it's really a team effort between NACE Maximo and engineering performance, and we look forward to more. So I want to give my full background just so you know that I've seen it from the very beginning plant user all the way to implementing and being an administrator over Maximo. This specific topic today is meters, and what they are, how they can be used, and how they can help us move from simply maintaining equipment based on the calendar and get more effective maintenance programs in place. So the agenda, which my mouse is super touchy, sorry. So which I kind of briefly touched on, we're going to talk about why use meters, what are meters, the different types of meters we can use, asset versus location meters, and how meters can really drive maintenance. I got some semi real world examples I'd like to show you, maximum, if we have time at the end. Uh, Basically, it's old data from other plants that I've implemented that they kind of have in a test environment for me that I can show you. And a couple ways you can use those meter readings to really analyze that data once you get it in Maxwell. So why do we use meters? I can't tell you how many times I've done an assessment I've gone through and every single PM is calendar based. That's kind of like with your car. If you do your oil change every 3, 4, 5 months, whatever they recommend now, instead of based on how many miles you've driven, you're probably over maintaining your car, very potentially under maintained depending on how much you drive. So a lot of maintenance is dependent on run hours and actually system conditions. So using a meter allows maintenance to be triggered by that meter and actual plant conditions. You have a tendency to talk through very fast, so please raise your hand if I'm talking too fast and you need me to slow down on some of this. But specifically, a meter is a record with a measurable value associated with an asset or location. It gives you a history of all these readings and conditions, and it ranges from run hours, starts, cycles, as we talk about mileage with cars, pressure, temperature, any kind of meter you have on the plant, we can basically duplicate in Maximo and kind of track those meters, similar to a logging software. And then we can use these meters as part of a preventive maintenance scheduling and planning. The important part of a meter is consistent use, right? There's been many times I've implemented a kind of a meter program where they updated them infrequently, and therefore, you weren't getting the full use out of them. So, important part is maintaining that consistency and capturing everything properly. The different types of meters there are in Maximo are continuous. These basically are meters that accumulate over time. The key example are run hours and mileage, right? As you maybe every week or month check your mileage on your cars and run hours on your turbines, you populate those and that'll accumulate over time, and then you get to your 10K, 20K, whatever kind of maintenance you have for that. The other another type is gauge, and that's exactly how it sounds. Where you can see a gauge, we can capture the information for pressure, temperature, level. The example I always give is like the differential pressure on a filter, right? Once you get too high, we can use Maximo to trigger a work order saying, "Hey, your pressure is too high, and your differential pressure is too high. You need to replace these filters." And then we have characteristics. That's more or less your pass fail kind of your text entries, right? So if you're doing inspection, and it failed the calibration, you could have the meter that they select either pass or fail. And if it fails, it triggers a corrective maintenance to address that, to calibrate that meter. And all these different types of meters, it all depends on what you have at your plant and how your program, your maintenance program is built. There's different records that meters can be attached to. My 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 recommendation is always to get it to the asset itself. So sometimes I've seen people put on a meter on like a boiler feed water overall location for pump run hours of the boiler feed pump. That meter should be associated with that pump so that we can pull up that pump and look at it and all meters associated with it and kind of give an analysis over time. So you can see as your outlet pressure starts dropping off or any number of meters that you're analyzing, you can evaluate that to the asset itself. Location, to be honest, I use meters on location very rarely, but there are some instances where you need that, for an overall location when it's not applicable to an individual meter. Maybe you're using a location for a skid and you have meters on that skid. You can apply meters to either one. But like I said, the preference is down to the meter level. And this is kind of the flow path of how capturing these meters can drive your maintenance program. Obviously, first we take these measurements and these readings. There's a number of different ways, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but you can either manually enter them, have an integration with your PI system or your logging software. But then we record these values through one of those methods. And then what that will give you is, your data that you can validate, check for missing or invalid data. Maybe I've had so many times where I've seen someone put in wrong readings, and you'll see on a line chart that we had a abnormally low DP. They put 0 in, right? We can just investigate that to see if it was an actual issue or a data capturing issue. Then use that information. So, I know anyone in any kind of preventive maintenance role has done oil samples, and generally when you send out these samples, you get line charts and graphs and all sorts of things to show you viscosity and total dissolved solids. You can have all that in Maximo to help one analyze and drive maintenance decisions. I do see a hand popped up. Sorry, can't see who it was, but feel free to. Was that telling me to slow down, or do you have a specific question? See, it was Alfredo.
Sí, hola. Carlos, ¿me podrías ayudar con la traducción? Hola.
Yes, of course. Michael, this is Carlos. Alfredo has a question in Spanish, so I'm going to translate for him.
Sounds good.
Ok, pregunta, ¿en los medidores tienen implementado o han implementado que se enlace con PI System?
Perdón, ¿podrías repetir la pregunta, Alfredo?
Ajá, en los medidores que está comentando Mitchell, ¿tienen en alguna planta o han logrado implementar que se enlace con PI System?
Oh, okay. Michael, the question of Alfredo is if you have some successful site where the PI interface is integrated. So the Maximo is fitted with PI data.
All right. I personally don't have any examples, but I would have to defer any type of PI integration to the NACE Maximo team. I know it's been done. I don't have any examples where I've worked. Most of the plants that I've been over have kind of defaulted to manual entry. And I'll show a couple examples of how we do that. But Tori or someone else on the line may have some examples that they can share, but I personally don't. But I do know it's possible. But that is above and beyond my level of knowledge, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's for the current NACE plants, right? But in your experience, you had some sites that were successfully connected, right?
I have seen sites that have done it. I haven't been involved in that, so I can't speak to it. I mean, ideally, you would integrate everything, right? Your data historian and get those meter readings in Maximo to drive those numbers or drive those PMs. So all I know that it is possible. I don't have any success examples for you. But,
Gotcha.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Does that answer the question? Oh, you're gonna translate for me. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna translate. Alfredo, Michael menciona que al momento él no tiene conocimiento de plantas que tengan implementado PI. Él comenta que en su experiencia ha tenido otros sitios donde sí ha visto esta conexión. De la parte del equipo de Nice Máximo, de la cual también un servidor está dentro de ese equipo. Estamos trabajando en una integración precisamente con historiadores como PI. Y estos sirven como orígenes de datos para poder hacer toda esta ingesta de datos. Igual, tan pronto como tengamos ese proyecto un poco más maduro, te podremos comentar igual para que lo puedas ver y puedas ver cómo interactúan estos elementos, ¿no? Y lo que comenta Michael es que también todos estos datos, al menos al día de hoy con las plantas que tiene, porque ellos se acaban de integrar al portafolio de NICE, ellos vienen de PIC, ellos hacen toda esta ingesta de datos de manera manual. Entonces, con esos datos que hacen los técnicos que ingresan, los técnicos, los operadores, es con lo que ellos están trabajando de momento.
Ok, de acuerdo. Gracias, Carlos. Thank you, Michael.
Claro.
All right.
Perfecto. Thank you, Michael. Go ahead.
No problem. All right. Trying to get to my. So how meters can drive maintenance, right? Kind of repeating what I've kind of talked about in the past, but the prime example is run hours. That's where I see it most. Meter readings are captured. You hit your 1,000 run hours on your turbine. You have a PM threshold, which I'll show you a little bit later in Maximo, where a PM is due at 1,000 hours. Maximo will automatically create that work order or generate that work order. And then from there, your business practices for how you assign that and complete it would take over. But in the end, a technician performs that PM that was due at 1,000 hours. They can complement calendar-based PMs, and really what I've seen most success is a combination of calendar and meter-based, right? So there's some activities that have to be done annually, but some are very much so based on how many hours your machine's running or different pressures and temperature readings. All right, some examples and best practices really are pumps. To be honest, I'm trying to think of how many times I've seen pumps PMs generate work orders. It hasn't been too much, but there is a case for that based on run hours and how many times you start that pump, right? That can drive when lubrication is needed or other inspections are needed, and when you need an overhaul. Overhaul is probably the most common example I've seen of run hour based maintenance on something like a pump. Once you get to, I don't have a number in my head, but 30,000 hours, 20,000 hours is generally some long instance where we're tracking those meters. And once we get to a certain threshold is where we want to look into overhauling that pump. Gas turbines, gas and steam turbine equipment, that's generally where I see a lot of run hour based PMs. A lot of the EPC are the I can't think of the word now. The recommended maintenance from the EPC or the manufacturer, recommended manufacturer maintenance is usually based on run hours. And that's where you get your 10K or your 15K or 20K PMs. And then, go ahead.
You were thinking about OEM?
OEM. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, your OEM. Yeah, sometimes when put on spot, I go blank, but thanks, Alex. But then you got, your compressors for your oil changes, filters, inspections, much like your car in your everyday example. Valves and actuators, a lot of times that would be based on cycles. Obviously you're not going to track every single manual valve cycle, but major valves that you need to track cycles, you're going to have that wear and tear on seats and surfaces. And then I always use mobile equipment as a prime example, because even if you're not in a power plant, you've driven a car and you know that you've got to change your oil I'm trying to remember what my current recommended maintenance for my car, but it's like 6,000 or 7,000. I remember when we used to do it every 3,000 hours. But in these examples, basically service is tied to actual use, not just some maintenance calendar that we have set up somewhere, right? Important question is, can we put a meter on it? And probably even a better question is, will this meter change on how we maintain the equipment, right? I'm not a fan of putting meters on every little thing just to have data, right? It needs to be useful data. It needs to drive meaningful maintenance and upkeep on that equipment. So potential benefits, I've already said it aligns with actual use. A lot of times switching over to meter base can reduce unnecessary PM activity. So many times we're going in and greasing a pump just because we said we're going to grease it every 3 months, right? There is such thing as overgreasing. I've been told overgreasing can be as bad, if not worse, than undergreasing a pump. You get much better maintenance history and planning. You can see, your usage over time when you've done maintenance and how that affected the meter readings every time you use that maintenance. And it gives you a strong foundation for condition-based strategies. I do have a brief example of condition monitoring in Maximo, just kind of how you can set alerts and required maintenance based on different triggers. Best practices to really implement your meters is start with the critical assets. Usually that's your turbines, right? Anything that would cause major impact on production, safety, any critical equipment, I would say it would first be analyzed for our meters. Then you have to define ownership for those meter readings. If they're just out there and we just say we have these meter readings for our turbine, just put them in when you get them. There needs to be some ownership, someone to drive those meter readings so we can ensure that we're getting proper readings and we're actually making use of them. Another thing that Maximo helps with is standardizing these units and data entry. Right, for every type of meter, you should put a unit measure, and we can set up those unit measures, and that standardizes it. In the past, you would put this on a spreadsheet. Someone would do PSIG, someone would do PSI, uppercase, lowercase, and then when you start to use that data in the long run, it starts to mess with analytics, right? If you standardize all the way data is entered in the units you use, it makes it much easier to analyze that data later. And then make sure we are validating some of those abnormal and powerful readings I talked about. Like say DP jumps up 200 pounds one day and the next day is back down to your normal differential pressure. More often than not, that's just someone like myself with very large fingers, kind of I call them sausage fingers, entering that information and it's incorrect, adding an extra zero or something. So you do got to keep an eye out for those readings. And then over time, as we enter these and we trigger those PMs, just keep an eye on those frequencies and see if they still make sense. A prime example is your cars. Over time, oil has gotten better. So in engines, I'm just lack of better synonym. Everything's basically better than it was 20 years ago, right? So 20 years ago, maybe we change oil every 3,000 hours, but due to efficiencies and improvements, now their recommendation is more around 5 to 7,000 miles, right? So over time, evaluating your PM program and checking your frequencies, both calendar and meter based, helps you maintain an efficient PM program. So I'm not a fan of repeating in PowerPoints, but it kind of happens. But meters, give Maximo and you visibility and actual equipment use or condition, and using the assets and location meters help you place those measurements where they actually belong, right? Because a data analyst years down the road, they can, but it's very hard to sort through a bunch of readings if they're not directly tied to assets. If I can go to this specific boiler feed pump and look at every meter associated with that over the past 10 years, that would help in the long run to analyze One, if we need a different pump. Two, if we need to change the PM program. You can make these meter-based PMs align with maintenance timing with actual operating conditions. Good meter data is essential, and that's talking about that ownership, that consistency, training your technicians or whoever's taking these readings. If it's not, automatically integrated to take the proper readings and double check and validate the information from time to time. I don't know how many times I've gotten calls when I was a Maximo admin saying our guys messed up this meter reading. They had access to be able to fix it, but we just had to go back and fix it because someone was looking at those meter readings and saw that something was way off. Or we triggered a 20K maintenance work order when we know that the readings were somewhere around 12K, right? So a lot of those indications could show when you have improper data, and you just got to go back and kind of clean that up. Let's see. This is my questions, comments area. Anyone have any questions or comments before I kind of take what time we have left to go over some kind of real examples in Maximo? Take that silence as a no and pull up. Oh, let me stop presenting. All right, so I have some examples I wanted to share. Oh, don't tell me it logged me out of everything. I did all this to get set up before, but what I'll do is I'll log in and kind of navigate around. This takes too long, we'll just drop it, but I just want to show you what meters look like in Maximo and how you can analyze those. All right, this might not be the best idea. Sorry, I did have all this up ready to share with you, but so this is Maximo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to meters and just show you a couple examples of some meters we have in this instance here. As you can see, I have ambient temperature on some meters. I have some cell temperatures, differential pressure, and I have different types: gauge, continuous, characteristics that we spoke about. I'm trying to remember the example I had that had some assets, but basically you set up your meter, you name it, you set up a unit of measure. These all come from the unit of measure table and conversions. So we set up a differential pressure, PSID, as a unit of measure, and we can see where we use this meter, and thankfully I picked one that we're actually using it. So as you can see, I applied this differential pressure meter to all these different suction filters. And if I grab one of those, let me find one from a different plant that had some more history. I think this one, gas turbine fired hours. So once again, this is just run hours for a gas turbine. And where used, you can see it's on all of our gas turbines. So what I'll take this asset, go to asset, and kind of show you what that looks like on an asset. So here's our asset record for the gas turbine. If you go to your meter tab, that's where you can see all meters associated with this specific asset, right? We have our differential pressure, gas turbine fire hours, fire starts, sprint hours, LP sprint hours, and I think that's it. And over here, what we can do is we can enter meter readings. So this is one way of entering meter readings is at the asset record, right? You can pull this up. It pulls up all the meters. It tells you last meter reading and the last time these were updated. And then you just put your new readings in, save, and move on. I wouldn't say that's the most efficient way of putting meter readings is going to each individual one, but that is one route. You can also look at your meter reading history. Under Manage Meter Reading History, you can click this, and you can look at a full history of all the different readings that have been entered. And you can export this table and put it into a graph or whatever you want to do to analyze these readings. And then what we do is we use these meters to trigger PMs. And now I've got to remember the PM that this was used on. So we'll go to preventive maintenance, see if it's tied directly to the asset, or maybe check relationships. Sorry, it's been a while since I've been in Maximo. I've been doing the documentation world for a while now, but it's all coming back to me as I've been reviewing this recently.
So this is similar to what like the control room operator would see, like when there's alarms and stuff, or how is that different from when they're seeing like some of the alarms going off? Or is that, this is like for maintenance?
Yes, ma'am. So what you're talking about is more live, real-time data, right? They're watching their control panels. I don't expect an operator to be staring at Maximo. Really, what we do is a lot of times in the past, the operators would have this work order assigned to them, and once a week they would go into all their panels and enter these readings that we want to use to trigger PMs. That's one of the manual methods of data entry that we can use to trigger these PMs. So what was I trying to get to? So it's a slightly different situation, Sandra, but it's the same data that we're going to take from those control screens and put in Maximo to drive these PMs. That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, let me get to preventive maintenance. Hopefully I have it directly to this asset. And you can see here I have one that's every 16,000 hours. So we'll look at this and just look at how that looks on the frequency tab of your PM. So this isn't a PM lunch and learn, so I won't go into too much detail on everything else, but on your frequency tab, you have two tabs. That's that time based, which is calendar based. And then you have your meter based. And this is where we associate that meter we want to associate with this PM. We say every 12,500 hours, we want this to generate this work order. And generally, you can see how many units you have to go to the next one. It doesn't look like we had any readings for this one, so it might not be the best example, but it will estimate your next due date based on your usage. And you can also have it generate ahead of time. So say we want it every 12,500, but you want to generate it at 12,000, right? Just so we can start planning ahead of time. You can do that. And you can also put in alert leads. I haven't never used these, but from what I understand, you can use these to kind of trigger some kind of report that says, hey, this is going to come up due in 1,000 hours, right? It doesn't actually generate the work order. This will give you your average units you use per day for this asset, and that's generally what can be used to calculate that next due date. But as you see, I don't have much history on this. This is a test environment, but that's kind of how meters tie into your PMs to generate those work orders. What I wanted to show you was a PM that was for run hour collection and how I generally do that. Let me see if I could find that quickly so I'm not wasting everyone's time. I think that collection is in the title.
So as you're doing that, so currently, like the Maximo program, like pulls that out, tells them when they should be doing some of these PMs or when they should be doing maintenance. What are places doing currently with that? Is it just like all manual with like notebook, or they just put it in and think that's when they need it? How is it currently?
So it varies from site to site, right? From what I've seen, I've been to plants that do all their maintenance programs in Excel, where they just have a list of their PMs, and as they do them, they'll update the last time they did it, and they, probably have some pretty sophisticated Excel formulas that kind of highlight the cell and say this one's coming up due, right? Not really. I'm never a fan of that. I'm much more a fan of using a CMS, specifically Maximo, to track when maintenance due and actually generate work orders where we can record, our actual data. So how many labor hours does this take? How much inventory? What inventory did we use? And use that to automatically lower your inventory levels, right? So it varies from Excel spreadsheets to even Tribal Knowledge. I've seen some sites that just have this guy that knows I need to maintain this every now and then. I don't recommend it. All the way to Maximo barely implemented, where they have their calendar based PMs where they just set it up. So every month I'm doing these PMs, every year, every year interval I'm doing these PMs. And then you start getting into the more advanced users that start implementing meters, condition monitoring, and really evaluate their program to, the whole risk matrix to see, one, should we maintain this equipment? Two, if we maintain it, how long is that going to extend the life of the PM? Is it more beneficial just to run it to failure? I don't know if that's the terminology I use anymore, but is it better to just replace it when it fails than it is to kind of take it apart once every year, right? You introduce more issues sometimes with maintenance. But that's why Jim's team is so good, that they can go through your program and kind of evaluate how effective your maintenance program is.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I mean, I've seen a wide variety, and
Yep.
I always push towards HCMS at the very least. Some are better than others. I'm a huge fan of Maximo, but there are some that I'm not a fan of, but they're at least better than the spreadsheets.
Yep, that does. Thank you.
All right, Alex.
Yeah, just a question on the time base and meter base. Is it possible to combine both of them, or you can only select one at a time?
No, absolutely. You can use calendar and time based. Let me make sure I'm not lying to you. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I'm almost positive I've used both time and calendar based.
Yes, you can use both time and
Okay,
meter.
good.
Yeah, you can use both. Sorry.
Nope, all good. Thanks.
And that's generally the best method, right? Because even if your run hours don't hit your target, what you want for that PM, you also don't want to leave that pump running for, years without ever actually looking at it. So that
Exactly.
is the
Yeah,
best.
just like mineral oils or grease, they have certain lifespan sometimes. So.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. What was I got sidetracked and forgot what I was looking for. Well, I'm failing it, but basically what I like to do is on a work order, we'll just create one real quick and I'll show you. Assuming we're in this test environment, I just got to make sure it actually works here. So let me start a new work order. What I'll do is I'll have a PM generate a run hour collection meter or work order, and then I'll add all the assets to the big multi-asset table, multi-location asset table. I'm trying to remember where that is on the work order. Here it is right here. So what I'll do is I'll list every asset on that with a route. And that way, when they get the work order, they're not having to find every asset. They're all right here. They can click on it and click enter meter reading. And I had an example ready for you guys, and that disappeared in the time it took me to talk to the presentation. But basically, they can right click on each asset and enter the metering from one work order. So it kind of organizes it all. It gives them a schedule to, update that. Generally, I'll have that weekly. Some people have done it monthly, but I prefer more often than not. So that's one method. Another method is through inspection forms for anyone that's used those. Once again, I had a wonderful example up there that basically walked into an inspection and said, well, what were the pressures, the temperatures, the differential pressure, and you enter all those, and those entries on an inspection form are tied to meters that can then trigger these PMs. Do we have another question?
Yeah, Mike, right quick. On the asset description, can you import that from Excel or just copy Excel, such as from an asset naming list?
So are you talking about doing like mass uploads of your asset table?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. There are ways to do mass imports there's a couple different methods, and really the people to talk to are Ace Maximo on what method they prefer.
Right.
But
it is
I've done it.
doable.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. And generally, what that looks like is someone like me or Tori or Megan would give you a template and say, "Here's your template. Here's what all these fields are, and kind of what they map over to what you're used to." And you can drop your data into that, and that can be imported in a couple of different methods.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So that way you're not manually putting in 10,000 records, right?
Right. Appreciate it.
No problem. So the other thing I want to show you with condition monitoring, I don't know how much time I have. I know I'm probably running out of time, but
Yeah,
condition
15
monitoring.
minutes.
Okay. We'll discard those changes. I just want to show you what condition monitoring and all the different fields are in there. I'm going to have to create a new record, or unless I saved what I had ready to show you guys. Look at that. For training, I actually saved something. So So what you have in condition monitoring is basically one point that you tie, to a meter to an asset. So this is for the gas turbine. It's a differential pressure. I just picked a meter. And then what you do is for your limits, you put in your upper warning limit, upper action limit, lower warning limit, lower action limit. So the upper warning limit is basically when you want some kind of notification, right? We can put this on a start center. We can create a report that shows here's a list of all your warnings this past week that these turbines reached their warning limit of 100, right? And then you have an upper action limit, which we can use to generate a work order. So once this gets up to 125 pounds, we can generate that work order, change out filters or whatever it might be, right? And same thing for lower. You don't have to use both upper and lower, but it gives you options for both upper and lower warning limits. You can have that either generate a work order from a PM. You can see here I brought in this turbine wash PM. I just kind of picked one at random there. This is what Maximo will use to generate that PM work order. Or if you just have a job plan, it can generate from the job plan as well. Down here is a bunch of history that you can view different alerts and history and work orders that were generated. But that's what condition monitoring in Maximo generally is meters that you tie directly to an asset that you set in warning limits that you want something generated. It's a little bit different than adding it to a PM. And then all this kind of ties into the analytics, where you can use this information. I have a couple different examples. I'll start with the most basic, an Excel spreadsheet, right? You can export your data into Excel and then just get a line chart for this one was bag filter DP. And then you can see, over time where your bag filter was, or if you had run hours, if it was continuous, you'd see a slow increase. And then this one is a gauge type that you can kind of see as they took the reading where it went to. If you want to get super fancy, we can get super fancy. It's just, once again, how you connect to the data. You can export, into Excel and create super fancy graphs that you can view all different meters from, right? Granted, this is kind of the higher level, like I can go by location. So say I want to look at my Black Start diesel generator on this report. I want to look at diesel generator number 1, and then I have all these different readings that I can look at. I can look at coolant temperature, frequency, line current, line voltage, oil pressure, run hours. And this is a good example of a continuous meter where it increases over time, right? It's never going down. But all the rest of these are gauge type. And then we have speed. So I just wanted to kind of show, how you can use this data if you collect it in the future. It can actually be useful for analyzing trends and driving maintenance programs. All right, I think I've exhausted all I had prepared for today. I wasn't actually expecting to go this long. So is there any questions, anything you guys want to talk about specifically to meters? If you have other questions, I'm sure with the wealth of knowledge we have on this group here, we could probably get answers for you. But any questions about anything I presented or anything? All right, looks like we got Alfredo again.
Hola, igual, Carlos, ¿me podrías apoyar, por favor?
Sí, claro.
Ok, bueno, actualmente nosotros tenemos máximo 7.6 y estamos evaluando actualizarnos al máximo suite. Actualmente nosotros, nuestros equipos los tenemos dados de alta en el módulo de ubicaciones. ¿Qué tan recomendable sería migrar con esa configuración? ¿O por su experiencia nos recomendarían cargarlos en el módulo de activos?
Okay. Michael, Alfredo says that they are currently running on Maximo 7, which is the previous version for Maximo, and all their assets they are using locations instead of assets. So he's asking if it works to keep in the location as locations or if they need to move into assets.
I mean, there's different philosophies, but I personally, and I would defer to Megan and her team because they are the Maximo experts when it comes down to it. But I prefer to have an asset for actual physical equipment that you are operating and maintaining. I've seen a lot of people that kind of duplicate locations and assets. They have a location and an asset for every asset. In the past, my preference has been to have a location more of a group as a group of assets. So a lot of times they align with like systems. So I'll have a boiler feed water system location. And underneath that, we have tanks, we have the boiler feed water pumps, the discharge or the suction strainers, the valves, and all that, all grouped under that location. That kind of gives you the ability to get your maintenance costs at the equipment level, but overall on the system level as well. But that's my preference. Yeah, I have seen people that use exclusively locations, and to me, that's never made sense. I would always want my equipment to have an asset associated with it.
Okay, thank you. Alfredo, Michael comenta que sí se podrían utilizar, sin embargo, es algo que le dejaría directamente al equipo de NAS Máximo y la mejor práctica es el tema de moverlos, es una mejor práctica y en lo personal él lo prefiere para poder tener esa agrupación de activos dentro de las ubicaciones.
Ok,
No sé si responda a la pregunta.
sí, de acuerdo, me queda claro, gracias.
Perfecto. Michael, yeah, the question is answered. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Anything else? All right, I don't see any questions. So once again, I'd just like to remind everyone that engineer performance is, happy to help with any Maximo needs. Obviously, the main implementation configuration would be handled by Megan and her NACE Maximo team. But if you guys, at the plants ever need maintenance programs evaluated, we have Jim Forehand's risk and reliability team. Or if you just need general help cleaning up data in Maximo, feel free to reach out to me. We're happy to help wherever we can. And with that, I think we're done. So I appreciate everyone coming out and listening and interacting. And I look forward to following more of these lunch and learns when I'm not the one presenting.
Thanks, Mike.
All
Thanks,
right, guys.
Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
No
Thanks,
problem.
everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye.